When we lose someone or something important in our life, our natural response is grief. An emotional suffering that we all will have to endure at some point in our lives. So, it is a relatable experience, one we all as humans share no matter who we are. When we know of someone going through such an endeavour, we understand the pain they are feeling and how great the loss must have been, and we respect what they are going through, even if the person experiencing this grief is our worst enemy. Grief, even with how painful it is something which allows us to see the human in the worst of monsters. Because of all this, we often see grief represented in many stories, whether it's a book, comic, TV show, film, or any other form of storytelling. Grief allows us to see a part of ourselves in the character, no matter who they are, whether they be the hero of the story or the villain. We are given the chance to see someone go through what perhaps we have already gone through or are currently dealing with. In these stories, we see many characters cope with grief differently, similar to how every person handles grief in their own unique way. Whether their grief be expressed through rage, despair, or depression, depending on where you are in your life, you may be able to see yourself in the character and understand the turmoil they feel on the inside that causes them to act in such a way. Now, I personally take a lot of writing inspiration from anime, as it is something I grew up with and is what helped grow my love for storytelling, world building, and creating characters people care about. Grief is something often explored in anime, and I think we can point to a lot of moments in a lot of shows where grief was represented with great honesty and care. But I think an overlooked scene in an overlooked anime is a great example of a truthful representation of such an experience. I assume if you are watching this video, you have already seen the anime Vinland Saga, or have read the manga. And if you haven't, well, it's a really good anime and you should watch it. The scene I would like to discuss in Vinland is from episode 5, just after Thor's wife and daughter find out of his passing and the disappearance of his son Thorfinn. And more accurately, I wish to discuss Ylva's reaction to this terrible news. Ylva. She's the daughter of Thor's and sister of Thorfinn. From episode 1, Ylva is presented as a strong woman, almost always seen with a large wool coat similar to what her father wears, making her appear broad and strong. Her hair is long and beautiful, but she keeps it tied back. She pays no mind to flirtations and keeps her mind on work that has to be done. I give this context as she is and is seen as a strong woman and must remain strong, which I think may help explain her immediate reaction after the news is given. When the men present Helga and Ylva with Thor's war chest, they tell them Thor's was admirable to the end and sacrificed himself for their lives. Leif tells them they lost Thorfinn as well and asks Helga and Ylva for forgiveness, and Ylva says, "Well, if they're dead, then that's the end of it. Crying about it gets you nothing but an empty stomach." Ylva must remain strong, even in such a time like this. After all, her mother Helga is weak, so what right would Ylva have to be weak as well in this moment? After all, if she were to waste time crying like she said, who would prepare a meal for herself and her mother? She couldn't, she shouldn't. For her mother and the village, she couldn't waste time being sad about a tragedy she could not control. She must accept what happened and look to the future, and decide now what she must do for that future. So she gets back to work. Taking up her tasks, we see her getting water with some of the other women, and during this, she admits she never saw her father living to an old age. Due to this, I believe she perhaps knew her father and brother wouldn't return, or at least had a strong feeling, and took the time to prepare herself, to be strong for the bad news, prepare herself to take up the load her father would now be unable to hold. One of the women note on how Thorfinn has gone missing, and the other asks if Ylva is okay. Obviously, this should be a burden that weighs heavily on her mind, but Ylva only laments with all the jobs she has to do, now her father and brother are gone. She focuses her mind on something else. She preoccupies her mind with every single task she must do. And with that, she carries on her current task, heaving up 2 heavy containers filled with water. We then see Ylva at home having provided food for her mother and herself. Her mother apologises for having to rely so much on her, but Ylva, pushing the notion aside, doesn't even allow her mother to stand up as she serves the food. Before she can even begin eating, Ylva rushes out to the sheep to feed them also. The scene shifts to Ylva shoveling snow outside her home. She ponders on how she will need to shear the sheep in the spring. We see here she is even thinking of tasks she must do in the future. That is how far she must reach out in her mind to keep it occupied. That is where her focus is, constantly keeping it busy so that there is never a gap, never a crack, never a brief moment where she could slip. Excitement in the village grabs Ylva's attention as men race to the water, harpoons in hand. We then see Ylva with her own harpoon successfully landing the first strike on the whale. The men in the boats around her cheer, and she does so along with them. It's a thrilling moment, a happy moment, as Ylva grins and cheers, her mind, yet again, distracted. Now, with the day having come to a close, and night now settled in, we find Ylva in her home with her mother. Still, she sees to her chores. As she weaves, she again speaks on all the work she has to do, and even suggests finding a husband. A small comment, but I think it is an important one in further showing what she is willing to put her attention on, just so her focus does not drift to the reality of her situation. Ylva keeps her mind on the future, whether it be several months away or 5 minutes away, instead of the immediate present where her family is dead, the immediate present that she has not dealt with, so it remains a part of her immediate present. So she must always distract herself from this immediate present. Desperate to keep her mind busy, she even considers getting a husband, something she paid no mind towards and didn't seem to care about until now. Her mind was so far away from finding a husband she couldn't even see Ares and other men's obvious advances on the days before her father's passing. But now she stakes it at the front of her mind as it is an idea that looks to the future away from the present. Helga suggests to her daughter that they head to bed. It was late after all, but Ylva insists her mother goes to bed while she still works. Helga says it is getting too dark to see, so she may make a mistake. Ylva doesn't respond. She just carries on weaving. Helga gets up and takes away Ylva's shed stick, and in this moment, Helga takes her daughter away from the distraction, and in taking her away from the distraction, she takes her away from the future. Ylva is left in the present, in her home where only her mother stood with her. The powerful presence of her father no longer there, her little brother no longer sleeping in his bed. No longer could she berate her father or feel his strong support. No longer could she see her brother excited, filling the house with noise. No longer could she squeeze him tight to frustrate and annoy him. Those were instances that now only existed in the past, and she could no longer experience in the future. She doesn't even realise the tears are falling from her eyes before she finally relies on another strength, her mother's strength, and cries. Ylva's brother went missing and her father was killed. With each chore she did, she pushed the emotion back. She tried to cope by repressing it, denying it, cramming it into the back of her mind, but it was always there. So finally she broke down and shed the tears she needed to shed. I think, as an aspiring writer, I appreciate scenes such as this when the reaction isn't immediate tears or rage that gives the character strength they didn't have before. While those, I believe, are accurate representations of grief and truthful ones, if you or I are creating a story, we should remember not every character will react in such an emotional way, at least not immediately. Some of us don't respond to the news of a loved one's passing with tears, or rage, or sadness. Some of us respond with nothing. We take the news in, say okay, and carry on with our day. We do our daily routine, we go to work, we go to the shops, we watch TV, we play video games. And it's not until our distractions leave, or are taken away from us, that we realise they aren't there anymore. and they never will be. Sometimes it's only when we miss them and realise that they are truly gone that grief hits us.